Hello and welcome to the CNBC-TV18 presents Industry Knowledge Exchange Conclave in partnership with SAP, and I'm your host Ruchira Sharma. This exclusive series brings together leading experts from across sectors to map industry-level transitions and create a roadmap for the future. The conclave also aims to highlight the critical role that technology and innovation plays for all sectors and create a robust roadmap towards building tech-powered centricity across all verticals. The global pandemic has exposed the weaknesses of traditional supply chain models. The ensuing lockdowns, disruptions compelled manufacturers and retailers to rethink their supply chain models and reimagine it for tomorrow's needs. Digital supply chain models present a huge window of opportunity. And against this backdrop, the world is also looking at India as one of the biggest growth markets. So, how can we leverage this opportunity to herald a vibrant new era of resilient and sustainable supply chain management? And that is the topic of our discussion. But before we begin the conversation with industry leaders, let's hear the opening address.
Thank you, CNBC team, for inviting me for this keynote address on one of the most important topic of our current times, that is the resilient and the sustainable supply chain. I had an occasion to be at Glasgow, and this particular topic was one of the most favored discussion over there. They added on to it the ethical part of it, so it was resilient, sustainable, and ethical supply chain. Definitely. Now, during this pandemic, during this COVID times, it was seen beyond any reasonable doubt that countries which have control over the supply chain end to end, those who have got proper tie-ups, and those who ensure that the robustness, the resilience, the sustainability, and the ethical standards of that supply chain is retained, they are the country which are able to prosper, bounce back to their normal position, even beyond that, once the pandemic is over. Industries are transcending to digitize. So digital solution is one of the key precepts, one of the key prescription for taking a particular supply chain to the level of resilience, sustainability, and ethical standards. Technology has to be there. If the digital version of supply chain, if it is digitally flowing from end to end, that means that the supply chain is robust, it is transparent, it is confirming to the best of the ethical standards, and it cannot be tampered so easily. Government, they have shown the commitment that we are not in the we will be we will be just providing a kind of role of an enabler, and the actual move forward is to be taken by the private players, and that is where there is a synchronized initiative of both private and the public initiatives, and so that the entire thing can be taken forward. So it's a wonderful topic, and I'm sure that the speakers, the arguments, the questions that will follow on this particular topic of resilience and sustainability of supply chain, this is that will be very, very enlightening, and it will add on. I shall be grateful if the findings that are taken out of this entire conclave is sent across to me for a learning, and kind of I will also be watching through. And yes, in the current times, when India is trying to leapfrog to a global best of the standards, and this is the time when the world is also looking towards India because of its inherent strength of skill sets and the manpower that we have. It is very important that the supply chain that we create, the supply chain, both greenfield as well as those which are already existing, those supply chains have to be resilient, they have to be sustainable, they have to be robust, and they have to be ethically best of the standards, so that India can be globally best in the area of industry and otherwise.
Organizations need to be agile and future ready. Supply chain leaders are at the forefront of this dynamic scenario, offering businesses the right tools to propel growth by building responsive, resilient, and sustainable supply chains. In fact, in this regard, India is being viewed as one of the biggest growth markets with the potential to become the manufacturing hub of the world. The government has also been undertaking massive investments to improve infrastructure, build megacities, and improve connectivity. But to turn this growth potential into a reality requires a realignment and a reimagination of the supply chain model into a digital supply chain network. And that is the topic for our discussion: resilient and sustainable supply chain. And for that, we have with us esteemed panelists. I would like to introduce them. Mr. Atul Gupta, Head of Corporate Optimization, Indian Oil Corporation Limited. Mr. Pushp Kumar Nair, Head SCM Lubricants, Bharat Petroleum Corporation Limited. Mr. Swaminathan R, Chief Supply Chain Officer, Aditya Birla Fashion and Retail Limited. Mr. Samrat Sehgal, Supply Chain Management, Head at Dabur India. Mr. Mohit Johri, Head Supply Chain Management, Shriram Pistons and Rings Limited. Mr. Rajesh Gupta, Head Supply Chain at JK Tires and Industries Limited. And we also have with us Mr. Ritesh Prakru, Head Digital Supply Chain at SAP. So thank you so much, gentlemen, for joining us for this very special show. So I'd like to begin by asking you, Mr. Pushp. According to a recent study, the business goal of a digital supply chain is to deliver the right product. So, what are the critical factors in your mind which contribute to building a sustainable and end-to-end operations, and how did you manage disruptions in your industry particularly?
Thank you, Ruchira. In fact, last 1.5 year has been truly disruptive. There has been too much of volatility in both demand and supply side. We have faced equal challenges, not only from the customer side because of COVID, but
Mhm.
also a lot of our suppliers have been affected very, very badly initially, and subsequently also the global supply chain continues to be challenged in so many input materials. So the way we are looking at is not only digitization
Mhm.
at BPCL for our lubricants business, we are deploying a total supply chain transformation. That is to right from the stage of manufacturing to warehousing to logistics, the connect with our retailers, consumers, mechanics. So the end-to-end value chain, we are engaging with them so that we can observe we can get the visibility of the channel, and we can adjust our strategies according to that. So we are in the midst of implementing a total digital transformation across our supply chain.
So, coming to you, Mr. Swaminathan, what are your thoughts here? How do you think you came over the disruptions, and what were the strategies that you used to overcome them?
Hi, as everyone knows, the apparel industry and the retail industry has been one of the hardest hit in the COVID. And we use this opportunity to dramatically change our processes. In fashion industry, the mind to market time, from the time we start designing a range and we deliver it to the store, the mind to market time has been anywhere between 8 to 9 months. This is a
Sure.
this is a pretty long time for any industry, and this is one of the challenges of the industry. So
Mhm.
this lead time has two components. One is the preparation which happens, in terms of designing the range, and then the second part is the delivery, actual supply, sourcing and delivery of the product. What
All
we
right.
set the target to ourselves is to reduce this lead time by 1/3, where
Sure.
we digitized our pre-production processes, the design processes completely to reduce the lead time, and our target is to move to anywhere between 5 to 6 months in terms of design to delivery. Yeah, this has been one of the initiatives which we believe will dramatically change in our working capital model, our
Mhm.
freshness at stores, our overall performance as an organization, and as well we believe we'll be leading in terms of digitalization journey here.
Thank you, sir, for sharing your insights there. But coming to you, Mr. Atul, how did you integrate your supply chain, and what were the kind of obstacles you faced? How did you overcome them? And what are your learnings from this experience?
Well, I would say that the supply chain of petroleum products for Indian oil is truly a global chain, wherein the supply chain length is about 6 months,
Sure.
wherein about 20% of our food, what we source, is indigenous, so about 15%, and about 85% is imported, for which we have to plan and place orders about for 5 to 6 months in advance of the actual requirement date, of the actual date when the product is required in the market. So when this COVID happened, when this disruption happened in March 2020, we already had about 2 million tons of crude oil in the pipeline, which had already floated from the various sale ports. There
Sure.
was another 1 million ton for which we had already placed orders. So, one, the demand went down all of a sudden. Second, we were part of the essential services, but nearly 50% of our produce or the output of the crude was not marketable. We had to run the system with only 50%. For that purpose, we had to redesign our processes in the system, and for which the entire technology backup which we had created over the years since 2005, that came into picture.
All
We have
right.
got a supply chain optimization tool available with us, which matches the requirements of the 9 refineries, 129 distribution points for petroleum, 100 LPG petroleum points, and 30,000 40,000 LPG distributors and retail outlet. The entire supply chain was tweaked to ensure that the LPG, which was the most essential commodity at that time, that was met, demand of that was met in full. Petrol that was met in full. The most difficult part was for us was to arrange for the trucks, the drivers, to
All right.
reach the product to their customer, to the retail outlets. The learning
Sure.
from this entire exercise, what has happened is, one, the supply chain, there has to be sufficient flexibility in the supply chain, the robustness, in the sense we should have tankages, we should have available capacities at the retail outlets, at our systems, so as any disruption is there, that should be taken care of by storing additional product. Third is
All
the
right.
human which comes into picture, the drivers to come to the job in spite of the restrictions, in spite of they being ostracized from their families, from their villages, and coming to the work. That was the major learning key. You have to connect with the human. Apart
Sure.
from the SEO, a human is the main part of the human, is the person who has to be taken care of.
So, Mr. Mohit, I'd like you to add your inputs here. What are the obstacles that you had faced and how did you overcome them?
Thank you, Ruchira. In fact, this was a catastrophe of unknown proportions. I mean, as I would put it, we never thought that something of this kind could happen to our industry per se, being in the automotive sector. And we had huge challenges. In fact, Mr. Gupta just spoke about the inventory challenge. We had huge inventory challenges wherein all the material which was in transit landed up with us. It was not getting consumed. So we had to live with a piled up inventory and
Yes.
a lot of other challenges. I mean, digitizing, while it was already in place, the digitalization effort was already there and it was happening. But to fast track it, to make people more aware of what they needed to do, because work from home, especially for a supply chain professional who has to be actually on the ground, working
It
from
has its
home
own
was
challenges.
was a major challenge, and we had to actually digitally make our people literate on that front. We had to give them VPN accesses. We had to train them how to manage calls, and once we were able to do it, then the life actually transformed. I mean, the catastrophe which came our way actually ended up becoming a boon in the long term, because we ended up digitizing the entire chain end to end, from say our customer's customer to our supplier's supplier, is what we've been trying to digitize and connect. And that's something which has been a boon. Now we are able to get 50 suppliers on a Zoom call at any point of time, maybe a half an hour short notice, and we are able to address, talk, resolve issues. So catastrophes and I mean these kind of challenges bring with them opportunities. So we harness those opportunities, and here we are. I mean, we are doing very well on the digitalization and the connecting front.
Thank you, sir. And Mr. Rajesh, would you like to add something to this?
Definitely. See, in a supply chain department is supposed to be agile. And during this pandemic, it was really tested to the core. We found that the demand, which became almost nil. Normally, March month is the peak month for sale in the tire industry. So last year, March, and when the lockdown was announced, so we were really planning for very high sale. Suddenly, there were the breaks, so the demand overnight became almost nil. And then from nil, after 2-3 months, the demand became very, very high, much more than the capacity. So we, within a span of 2 to 3 months time, we found demand fluctuating between 0 to almost, let me use the word, infinite. So whatever was there, we could produce or supply, everything was consumed. So this time the challenges are many, whether it is transportation, whether it is on the road or the drivers availability, people falling sick, depot and warehouses when to open. There were lockdowns at different times. So sometimes, and we had to use a lot of creativity. Let me use this word, creativity, agility, so that sometimes the shop is open only for 2 hours in the morning, between 5 to 6. The people used to go, open the shop, give the tires. Many times the ambulances orders, the hospitals orders were coming for the tires. The feeders and depots were closed. So we were asking them, we asked them that you come and collect. And like that, lot of across India, another thing which I found was that there was a lot of team spirit. Because of this problem, each and every department, each and every one came very, very close that how to come closer to customer. So agility, then relationship building, team spirit, and then automation. Basically, definitely we have a lot of, you can say, digital solutions. Then Zoom calling, phone calling. Normally in companies we don't have these kind of you can say tools used extensively with vendors or within the company, but we are using it. In fact, we are working 24/7. So we were at home. So it was basically anytime, anyone, and all the top management or the field, each and everyone was available. So it was really wonderful experience. Let me say that.
Definitely. So I'd like to bring Mr. Samrat in here. I'd like to ask you, sir, how critical is the integration of supply chain planning with the rest of the business? And do you think businesses have done enough to create a seamlessly integrated ecosystem?
So I think supply chain as a function, it has been evolving, for the last 12, 15 years. You will see the importance of the supply chain function has, gone up notches. Every year there has been a change which has been seen by the people. However, during the pandemic, what we have realized that it was not the brands which were competing with each other during the pandemic period. It were the supply chains which were competing. All the supply chains which were agile, which were able to adapt themselves, those were the companies which were actually successful, and their products were reaching the customers, and they were able to achieve sale and serve the society at that point of time. So that's the way I look at it, today and tomorrow and going forward for years to come. It will be the supply chains which will be competing with each other, and hence the organizations which realize the importance of the function will be the ones which will be able to differentiate in the marketplace. That's the way I look at it. Many organizations I would like to bring in here, at this point of time, have realized that already, and they are actually investing in the area of supply chain. They, the caliber of people they are, deploying, in investment in infrastructure, investment in technology. A big share of that is actually going to supply chain. Whether all organizations have done it, I think it's an evolution which is, happening, and the pace of evolution has actually increased during the lockdown.
So I'd like to bring you in here, Mr. Ratish. Of course, we've heard about supply chain disruptions and how they can be managed by leaders. So as a key enabler in the technology space, what is your learning here? What are the kind of trends that you've been seeing, especially over the last 18 months since the pandemic hit?
Sure, ma'am. Over the past 2 years, change has been the only constant around all of us. And this pandemic also has changed everything and tested our resilience. Businesses, as we see, are seeing changes in consumer behaviors, newer business models are evolving, variations in production and plant capacities, and constant changes in supplier commitments. Consumers are now engaging differently, they are working differently, buying differently, and basically living a virtual life. With health and safety the top of the mind for every consumer, we are seeing visible demand spikes in consumption patterns in categories like groceries, home and office essentials, and health and fitness products. And with these social distancing norms and India's smartphone user base at about 400 million, we are observing a huge uptake in consumer e-commerce spending, where order transparency and easy access to the internet is further driving consumer behavior.
All right.
So now supply chains have transitioned from being something in the back end to the front end center for businesses and are now helping organizations deliver enhanced consumer experiences. Today,
Definitely.
digitization is not a luxury, not a necessity, but an imperative for all of us.
So thank you, gentlemen, for joining us and sharing your insights with us. It was truly an incredible and extremely insightful discussion. And the role of resilient supply chain model in providing a competitive edge to businesses across sectors is critical. To sum up, businesses need resilience and agility, not just in products, but in processes and people to meet the changing demands in the new normal. Thank you all for watching this very special show, and thank you all for joining us.